think that was what really made me like, okay, like I do not want that feeling again of being so close to winning it and then getting sprinted through. And I think before, whenever we talk about NCAAs, it was hard for me to really understand what it was going to be like. And then actually being in the race, I think that race too was one of the closest NCAAs ever. The whole field was within like a few seconds. It was super competitive that year. So just experiencing it firsthand, I really went into the next few years with such a greater understanding of exactly what we were working for and exactly what needed to be done to reach our goal, which was to win NCAAs.
Cool. All right. I'm excited. You ready to get started?
Yes, let's do it.
Cool. All right. So for everyone listening, like I said, Kate, we're already recording, but I have Kate Knifton here, who is an Olympic team member, a national champion, who I'm very excited to talk to. She's wearing her Texas gear, which is a lot of the reason why I wanted to have her on here, because I was able to go down to Texas and watch one of the races last year against Michigan, which was one of the coolest opportunities. We're going to dive into that real deep. But Kate, let's kick things off. Let's get things started. Tell us a little bit about your background, because, again, we're going to dive into a lot of things regarding the current state that you're in, which is preparing for Paris and getting ready for the Olympics. But also a lot of the stuff I want to dive into is you've had a pretty, obviously a stellar college career that I want to talk about. I think there's a lot of things that we can take away from that experience that can help athletes, at the high school level, through this process. But also let's talk about what's on the horizon here. But before we get to that, give us a brief introduction on a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your experience, and then obviously where you are today, which we didn't even go over when we were talking a second ago, but where you are currently today, where you are in the Olympic cycle, as we are, like 2.5 months out from when things really start to heat up for you. But why don't we start with that?
Yeah, so I'm from Austin, Texas, and I grew up dancing for most of my life. I did competitive dance at a studio, and then I was on my high school drill team, which is a big thing down in Texas, and I know a lot of places in the South. And then my sophomore year of high school, I joined rowing at the Texas Rowing Center, which is actually a club my dad owns in Austin, Texas, on Lady Bird Lake, which is the same lake that I rowed on with the University of Texas in college. And I always kind of knew I wanted to go to the University of Texas because my family, my mom, my dad, both sets of grandparents all went to UT. And so I grew up like 10 minutes away from the school, just kind of watching them on the water as I started my rowing career. And ended up going to school there for 5 years, had a great experience there. And then just joined the national team over last summer. I graduated in 2022 officially, and then finished my 5th year in 2023 and started training at the Princeton Training Center about a month after graduating. And now we're just preparing for World Cup 2. We actually leave on Sunday, so we're going to Italy for a few weeks to prepare, or I think like 8 days, so a little over a week. And then we're going to head to Lucerne. And then we come back here after World Cup, train a little bit more in Princeton, and then head to Italy again for a pre-camp for the Olympics, and then to Paris.
And so you're currently in Princeton now, right? At the training center, like you and the entire team are currently at Princeton now. Is that where you are?
Yes. All of women's sweep is currently in Princeton, getting ready to leave.
Okay. Gotcha. And so you guys leave on Sunday, you go overseas, race, and then you come back, you have a little bit of a gap before you go officially over for, kind of through the Olympics and all that. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, so we kind of break it up into 2 little like chunks. So we have this training chunk in Princeton, and then we're going to have another one when we come back.
Okay. And for people listening, because I want to dive into a lot of, right, you left out a lot of awesome stuff regarding your college career in Texas and all that, and we're going to dive into that here in a second. But I want to stay on this Olympic path here for a second, because you finished your time at Texas and then jumped straight into, it sounds like, this current path that you're on, which is to make an Olympic team, race at Paris, and all the stuff with that. But give us a little bit of a current context in terms of where are you guys with what you can, talk about, like, where are you guys in terms of like, is our boat set and you guys are ready to rock and roll, and now it's just about fine tuning things? Maybe tell the audience what boat you're currently competing in or preparing to compete in? Give us a little insight as we're, only a few months out.
Yeah, so we actually just finished bow selection last week, and I'm going to be in the straight four. So I'm excited because that was my, a few summers ago, I raced at U23s in the straight four with 3 of my teammates from Texas. And it was just like such a great experience. We had so much fun. So it kind of feels like, I don't know, like repeating that experience, but with a new team. So I'm really excited for it.
Gotcha. And for you, like, was this Olympic journey, and maybe this can kind of stem into a little bit about, maybe before you even got to Texas and start, right? You said that you started rowing at, the Texas Rowing Center early. And I think I saw like, you had some success there prior to going to Texas. And then obviously, winning a couple of national championships and all the fun stuff that you guys accomplished down in Austin. But was this path and how it's been laid out currently, was this all part of your plan, like early on? Like, when did you realize that this was a feasible outcome for your rowing trajectory to go high school to Texas? Obviously, everything that materialized at Texas, is by just, that may or may not have been in the storyline where go win, that's what, do what we did at Texas, but then make the Olympics after. Like, was that all part of the plan to go straight from college right into trying to go to Paris?
Yeah, so I guess it's hard because it's always something I wanted to do, but you never really like know that you'll make the team until you do, and there's really no guarantee no matter what path you're on. And there's definitely been like some ups and downs to like my journey to get here. In high school, I was on the under-19 team my junior and senior year, and so that was kind of my first experience with international racing and being on a national team. And I really liked that, and that was kind of like what inspired me to want to continue racing internationally in addition to rowing collegiately. But I think like I had a huge learning curve once I got to Texas, because coming from Texas Rowing Center, it's a little bit of a smaller club, and we didn't do a ton of like we did major races, but it's not like some of the clubs where you're training almost the same as what a college team would do and just doing like so many hours and getting all this experience. It was a little bit like less than that, I guess. So coming to college, like I had a lot to learn still and a lot of improvements to make to really get to that level. So I think like my first few years, I wasn't thinking so much about that. I was really just focused on like rowing with Texas and the goals I had with my team there and the goals like we had as a team. And then kind of nearing the like end of my college career was when I started thinking about it more. And racing at U23s is like a big thing that really like made me want to keep going with international racing, just because we had so much fun and it was such a cool experience. So kind of going through that. And then my senior year of college, I got pretty injured. I had a herniated disc issue and was getting a lot of like nerve leg problems with that, and then ended up getting back surgery my 5th year in the fall. So I think that was the one thing that kind of made me like unsure of the journey moving forward. And I think like I always deep down like really believed that it was going to work out and that I was going to be able to keep rowing, but of course like you never really know with something like that. And I knew a lot of people that had the injury, and obviously it's a big one for rowers. A lot of people go through it, but I didn't know anyone that had the surgery and been able to keep rowing afterwards. A lot of people I knew had like retired from injuries like that, or had maybe had the surgery, but then afterwards didn't continue rowing. So I think that was definitely something that kind of like put a little bit of a stop in the path and didn't make it just like smooth sailing to get from, okay, like things are going really well in college and then I'm just going to keep rowing afterwards. So I think after that, I had to do a lot of rehab and take some time off, and it worked out really well that I was at school that year because I was so lucky to have like my training staff at school and all of the resources at Texas. Obviously, it's a great school in terms of like providing their athletes with anything they could possibly need in a situation like that. So going through that and coming out of it, I knew when I was getting the surgery that if all went well, like I really wanted to continue rowing. And I think that going through that made me appreciate rowing so much more and like what it would do for me. And if I had any doubt before of like, I don't know if I want to do this afterwards or if I just want to like go get a job or do, other things like that really solidified it for me. So after that, I was pretty sure that, or like very sure that I wanted to continue rowing.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, and I do want to because I was able, I do want to talk a little bit about maybe some of obviously your experience at Texas, but also you brought up a great point about the resources available when you were dealing with a back injury and things like that.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that here down the line. So I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts on that and that path. But before we dive into a little bit more about Texas and college and all of the experiences that you had there, tell me a little bit about like, it sounds like, so you said dancing and then rowing, like, and I'm curious for you, like, I guess one of my questions would be like, did you feel like there's a correlation that, with your dancing career that helped you or helped fuel your rowing path? Or was there other athletic activities that you were involved in, maybe just, other sports or anything like that? But like, where did this, I guess a path of dancing to junior national or national, junior national team or all the stuff that you achieved at the high school level. Like, I'm curious myself. I'm sure others are as well. But like, was there a correlation or something that helped? Like, did you learn like coordination and awareness through dancing that helped fuel the transition to rowing and make it a little bit quicker than maybe some of the other people? Was there other things that you did that helped with that success? Describe a little bit about this passion for rowing and where that started as well, but also where did your athletic path leading up to that start to develop? I know that's a broad question, but I'm curious about the inner, all the different things that influenced this path early on.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like the path from dance to rowing is probably like less common. And I don't think because some other sports like I did competitive summer swim team before that, so it wasn't like year round or anything, but that kind of was more of a direct like correlation in terms of the workouts we were doing and the athletic skills required because it's another endurance sport. But I do think that dance really helped me gain like an overall body awareness because you have to have such control over like everything you're doing and learn the little muscles that are kind of like making different movements and like allowing you to do different things. And I think especially in terms of learning how to follow people in the boat or even stroking, like setting a rhythm, a lot of that you do learn in dance, whether it's doing a group dance and you're learning to like match with other people. And it's the same thing in rowing where everyone has different like body types and proportions, but you're all doing the same movement. And then that really correlates to dance where everyone's both a little bit differently, but you're trying to create the same like overall look between everyone. So I think that definitely helped. And then obviously things like just working with a group of people, like making the most of different personalities on a team. That's something that you'll learn in any sport, regardless of if it's like an endurance sport or something like dance. So I do think that there was correlation between the two, even though it seems a little bit like different.
That's interesting though. I didn't think about like obviously the body awareness and being able to, like understand how right the flow of things, the natural rhythm, right? A lot of those things can probably
Mhm.
stem from a sport like dancing, but even more like the ability to like I don't know, like again, there's different set, kind of probably aspects within a sport like that or a competition like that, but rhythm in and of itself, right? Being able to kind of follow rhythm and choreography with other dancers or whatever it may be. But
Yeah.
like there's a lot of that's a very, again, you don't hear a transition like that very often. So I think for, it's a very cool thing to think about. But with that, like, and then you transitioned from there, you started rowing at the high school level. Like, did you figure, like, was it like a quick transition where it's like, oh, I'm actually pretty good at this? Was it something where it's like, oh, I actually love this, this, like, when did it start to kind of click for you at the high school level? Was it right from the jump, or was there a little bit of a path to get to where you ended up, through the high school process?
Yeah, I don't think it was like a super long process, but I definitely think at first it's just so different than anything like anyone has really probably ever done before. When I first learned to row, I was learning with my dad in a single, and like the first day I went out, I probably flipped 10 different times, and I was so frustrated. I was like, I can't do this, because I was with my cousin at the time, and he had taken a learn to row camp, so he was just getting in the boat and rowing around, and I couldn't take like 3 strokes, and I thought of myself as someone that was like pretty athletic and could just pick something up easily. But I think that was a little bit of a learning curve, and I guess I'm someone who like wants to be good at something right away, and so that was definitely a little bit of a like moment where I realized that it's just something different and you're not going to like pick it up immediately. But luckily, since my dad is a rower and rowed in college and just has a lot of experience, he kind of was like telling me it's okay. Like most people, I don't know if everyone flips the first. I'm gonna tell myself everyone flips the first few times. So that definitely made it better. And he just kind of like encouraged me to keep going. And then once even when I started rowing in big boats, it was pretty tough at first. I just remember I took a learn to row class with some masters rowers, and I was trying to like sit in the boat and set the boat, and I just couldn't figure out like the correlation between your oar and having the boat set. And these people were like 40 or 50 years old, and they were getting so mad at me. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I really like want to fix this, but I was like, I'm gonna give up after this. Like, this is so frustrating. I don't want to row with people that are gonna be like mad at me because I don't know how to do any of the stuff. And I think we were doing like a tap down drill, and I just kept catching crabs over and over. I think everyone in the boat like knew how to row obviously better than I did, and I'm sure my dad like forced me to go to that class and thought, oh, she'll just be amazing, like every dad thinks their daughter's just going to be perfect, so we'll stick with these people that know how to row already, but she'll just pick it up. And I definitely did not, but I'm glad that I stuck with it. And I think once I was with people like on my team, it definitely helped like motivate me. And when I first joined, I was with a lot of people that had already like been rowing a little bit before, but then there were also some people that were new. And I think everyone was super understanding. They could remember when they were first learning how to row, so that definitely helped me pick it up and eventually not flip every time I was rowing or catch crabs every stroke.
Yeah, and that like, and then I mean, that's again, I think that's great perspective for athletes out there. It's like, there is that learning curve that applies, right? No matter at what level you are today, like everyone kind of had to go through this process, and to kind of understand, or to be, again, like within any sport, right? When you're first starting, right? There's probably certain aspects where, man, everyone, it's like everyone else can do this specific skill, but I'm struggling. And now again, like it starts to kind of snowball. It's like, but kind of sticking with it, eventually you're going to kind of, again, like, okay, maybe you flip 10 times the first practice, but now you're flipping, once a month, and maybe now, maybe if you're in a single now, like you're not flipping at all. I don't know. It's like, it's
I
just
did flip the last time. I still flip now and then, so it's okay. Everyone flips every once in a while.
Yeah.
Maybe not everyone, but I
happens.
do.
Happens to everyone. So, no, that's awesome. And I think with that, like, okay, so now you're in high school, and now where did you referenced that you have a lot of family that went to Texas, your dad and some other family members. And I was fortunate enough to go down to Texas last year, which is funny. I was actually just visiting a friend who lives in Austin. And I was like, okay, well, it's the spring and I want to make the most of this trip. So I'm going to look up when UT is racing, and happened to be when you guys were racing Michigan. So I got to go down and actually see, and I was with one of your assistant coaches, Coach Baker, and he gave me a whole tour of the facility. So I got to see everything, from the training center to to the actual physical, training center on campus, to the training room, to the weight room. And they actually took me up into the stadium where I could see the stadium, the football stadium. I'm a football fan, so that was really fun. But I was blown away by like just the facilities and like what that university, the the emphasis that they put into athletics, right? Where athletics kind of falls on what is very important to the fabric of a school like that. And I was, again, like it was an unbelievable experience. And obviously watching you guys race the next day was really awesome, right? Going, sweeping Michigan and on on your home course, which was a pretty awesome experience. But for you, how did you land on Texas? Was it purely the family ties to it? Were there other things that you, as a high school athlete who started rowing as a sophomore, went through this process to become pretty good at it, but then you probably had the option to look at some other schools out there? Like, what made you, or what kind of what were some other big influences besides just the family ties that drew you to Texas?
Yeah, so originally I didn't want to go to Texas solely based on the fact that like my whole family had gone there, and that was really the only reason. I think I just like went through the phase in high school where you just want to be different from everyone else, and you're like, I want my parents as far away from me as possible, which, sorry if they're watching this, but I just wanted to like go somewhere different and just like be different than I guess everyone else. But I think like deep down, well, that's how I felt at first. And then whenever I went on my unofficial visit, like I went to the first practice and I was like, oh, I'm going to go to Texas. Like if they give me a spot, like I cannot say no to this, because it was just like, it's just an environment like you've never seen before. And you saw a glimpse of it when you were there. But I think like I went to the practice and there was a meeting before practice and everyone like meets together. Dave writes the lineups on the board and he kind of just gives you like a little like inspirational something. It's like whether he listened to a podcast or saw a quote, or he's just very knowledgeable about like what's going on in the world and like what's going on with all these different sports teams. And each day that's kind of like the focus for the day. So it's something you can take into your practice or just like your day afterwards. And a lot of those things that he says in those meetings are the things that I like tell myself now, just like throughout my day, and just to like inspire myself. But the way he was like talking, and everyone just like is so like they're just listening and really taking in what he has to say and so engaged, and like he would just say something and everyone's like laughing together. I don't know, it was just, the whole thing was just really something I'd never seen on a team before, and everyone just seemed so like happy to be in each other's presence. I guess it sounds so like cheesy, but it's really true. And I think just right away I could tell that it was just a team like no other, and people wanted to be there. People had great attitudes that was clear from someone from an outside perspective. And just like everyone had common goals, and everything they do is so purposeful, whether it's everyone wears Texas gear to practice every day. Everyone, like terminology they use is like centered around Texas, and just like everything is so uniform. And that's really, it's just the little things that all come together to kind of like make up the team culture. And the team culture is so set that I think anyone can walk in and like become great, because everything is so like already established, and there's such strong leadership, I think, from like the top down. So going on my official, I just knew that that's where I wanted to be. And I think another big part of it was I visited a lot of different schools, and at first I didn't really have that much of a direction. I just kind of visited like any school that had a rowing program and sounded good to me. So went really just like all over the place. And a lot of them, you'd go into their boathouse and you see all over the walls, there's like photos of all their national championships. They have all these trophies from different like regattas and championships they've won, and like pictures of Olympians and all of that. And then at Texas, there wasn't any of that, because the program had never won a national championship and no one from the team had ever made an Olympic team before. And so I think that was something that really appealed to me, was that I wanted to be part of like the first for the program. It was like a team that was kind of like on the up and up, but that was still like really working to get where they wanted to be. It wasn't a team that had already reached all the success, and it was just kind of like trying to stay at the top. So that really appealed to me. And then also, I think just being from Austin and seeing them every day on the water, I like knew who all the girls in the varsity were. Their stroke seat of the varsity, LJ, I thought she was so cool. I knew who she was, and I would see her at races like San Diego and just like fangirl over her. And then I'd see them like rowing by in the morning, and you could hear their coxswain. And it just like the whole ambiance of the team was just really like amazing to me, and it just kind of felt like my school because I was from Austin and I had so many like ties to it. And I think it was the only school where I felt like if I went somewhere else, I would have like FOMO of not being at that school. Like if I pictured in my head being somewhere else and then like seeing Texas or having Texas like winning a race or something like that, like I knew I would feel left out if I didn't go there.
What's up, everyone? Kevin Leslie, and quick interruption to the podcast. If you're a high school rower who aspires to take that next step and row at the college level, and you're trying to figure out what is the best path for me, how do I find the best fit academically, athletically, and personally? Let's have a conversation about it. Let's set up a Zoom meeting where we can dive into this is what I'm looking for in terms of schools, this is what I'm looking for in terms of rowing programs, and how do we build a plan that can best position you for long-term success. And this will take one of two routes. It can be specifically within recruiting, where we're creating a list of schools, and based off those schools, we're reaching out to coaches. Or you could come to me and say, hey, Kevin, I want to row at this level. I might not be there today, but I want to develop a path that can guide me in that direction and set me up where one day that could be a possibility. And we're going to have that conversation in our Zoom meeting. And right now, throughout the spring season, we're setting up free Zoom meetings for all the podcast listeners using the code SPRINGRACING24. So use that code, set up a meeting, and let's begin to initiate that conversation and get you moving in the right direction. So again, set up a Zoom meeting on my website, SPRINGRACING24, and let's begin to move you in that direction. Now back to the show. Peace. When I was in the facilities, one of the coolest things, and like the probably this for you whenever you go back, or how often, obviously you're incredibly busy now, but when I was in the kind of facilities and to see the coolest thing I've probably ever seen within rowing in general, and I've been in a decent amount of boathouses, not not all of them obviously, but the coolest thing I've ever seen like in a training facility was the script of the national championship race from the coxswain. Like I saw that and I was like, wow, this place is different. Like the creativity to even kind of do that and put that up. And actually the best part was it's in the shape of what I think it's in the shape of Texas. Like that to me, like speaks to just the culture that you guys have at, a university like that, the program, like, and just something deeper than just like, oh, like, this is Texas. Like there's something like, again, like that you're greater, you're part of something that's greater than yourself. And I think, again, when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is something different. And I guess for you, like none of that really existed, at least on paper, right? Or like in the public to the same degree in the public eye until probably you guys won your first national championship, right? That's when, at least for me, and probably a lot of people out there, it's like, oh, like it puts you guys in, where it's like, oh, Texas is here. Like they're, and this program's no joke. Like describe that experience going from, okay, I think in 2019, you still had, I think you were part of the V8 that, still finished in, on the medals dock, right? Getting second, I think, or something like that. But then obviously pandemic and all that happened, right? But then coming out of that, like 2021, being a part of the first national team or national championship team, like describe that experience. Like you've been seeing this program your entire life, and now you are a contributor to the highest peak it's ever seen. Describe that feeling and that experience for everyone.
I think it's just so cool to kind of watch the program like grow with me and like me grow with the program. And like coming in, I raced in the varsity my freshman year, but like when I first came in, my goal was, okay, if I can make a boat for NCAA's, like that would be awesome. And I kind of thought like, oh, it's going to be really hard and maybe I won't make it this year, but that was my goal. And I think like what really helped me get better was rowing with these girls who had so much experience and being put in kind of like uncomfortable situations, like rowing with them. And I attribute so much of this to Dave for giving me that opportunity, because I think he does a really great job of pairing freshmen with older girls on the team. So like my first ever week, I think at Texas, we would do 7K races in pairs, and it was kind of like a pairs matrix type of thing. And I was paired with LJ, who was the girl who had stroked the varsity and ended up stroking it that year, and who I had always like looked up to. And I was so nervous. I like have never been so nervous for a row in my life, because like I knew probably everything about her. She was like, who is this freshman that's like gonna, and I was like probably steering us straight into bushes. But I think just like getting to row with girls like that is really what like helped me get better. And so then freshman year, raced in the varsity, and we were second at NCAA's to Washington. And so I was the bow seat. So we were leading for like part of the race. I think it was like 750 to go to last maybe 200 meters. And in the bow seat, you can tell obviously when you're in the lead, because there's like no one in your peripheral. So, and then we got sprinted through by Washington in the last like 300 meters, 200 meters of the race. So it was a great race, and we were so happy with it, because that was the best that Texas had done ever at NCAA's, and just a great showing by all boats as a team. But I think that was what really made me like, okay, like I do not want that feeling again of being so close to winning it and then getting sprinted through. And I think before, whenever we talk about NCAA's, it was hard for me to really understand what it was going to be like. And then actually being in the race, I think that race too was one of the closest NCAA's ever. The whole field was within like a few seconds. It was super competitive that year. So just experiencing it firsthand, I really went into the next few years with such a greater understanding of exactly what we were working for and exactly what needed to be done to reach our goal, which was to win NCAA's. And we, as a team too, like we never really talk about winning, but of course, like everyone knows that that's like the end goal, but it's more like just about the journey that like we follow as a team. But then the next year was COVID, so big disappointment, because I think we were really gearing up to like have a really great showing at NCAA's. We had been working super hard, and then obviously everyone felt that way. Super disappointing. But then the following year, it was kind of an even bigger build up, because it was the culmination of 2 years rather than just one. And rowing in the varsity, like that boat that year had so much just chemistry as like personalities, I guess. And I think that was just like an unreal experience from the start to the finish of the year, because it felt like you truly were just a part of something like much bigger than yourself, and really pulling for the people in your boat, but also the program as a whole and every like girl that had come before you to get Texas to where it was at that point. And I think just winning that year, it really meant so much, just because, right, it was a program that I had seen like in front of my eyes developing all these years. And yeah, we were a part of the first year to win, but it took so much more than just us. And I felt lucky to have gotten to see that at least for 2 years before, but so many people even before that were such a big part of it.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, again, like I when I coached on the men's side, and, at my alma mater, St. Joe's, here in Philadelphia, but like to see, like, again, like now as I am in this phase of my career, like I'm getting more and more invested in watching the college level or the NCAA level, on the women's side, and actually seeing like, and again, like I think it's so cool to see programs like Texas, like, again, I'm a big college football fan. Like, these are programs that I've been, or universities that I've been watching on TV for, my entire life. And to kind of see rowing, like these programs with really incredible rowing programs and how they're really starting to kind of, again, put their, compete at the highest levels. Like, it's so exciting. And to see also like the facilities that you guys have there, right, and all the different things like that the schools invested into the program, like I was blown away by it. And I think one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, to, as a national champion V8, right, stroke seat of the V8, right, like, I'm curious for you if you can like, as we put ourselves in the shoes of high school athletes who are thinking about college rowing, and men or women, boys or girls, right, regardless of what level, but when they look at someone like yourself who competed at the highest level of, literally the highest level, right, winning it all of college rowing, if you can, like, describe a little bit about, like, what does a normal regular season week look like for an athlete who's going to be positioning themselves for a grand final type crew? Like, describe, like, and it can be a couple different avenues, right? Maybe it's the, the course or the total load in general, meaning like all the things that you have going on, including academics, but also like the training side of things. Like, oh, like, we're like, this is how hard we work. Like, these are some of the things that we do. Like, again, with whatever you can share, like, give the high school athletes out there who are thinking about life as a Division I NCAA grand finalist type crew, give those athletes a little context on what they could expect if they were to go down that route.
Right. So I think for a lot of schools, it ends up being pretty similar because you're constricted by the 20 hours per week NCAA rule. But for us, we kind of broke it up into each morning on the water. Those were our like rows for the day. I think we started, I have short-term memory, but like 6:15, 6:30, you're at the boathouse, which is crazy because we start later here. And I was like, how did I used to wake up and like get going so early? But yeah, we're on the water in the mornings. And then after that, come home. I always arranged my schedule so I could take a nap because I'm a big napper. I take a nap at least once a day, every day. So take a nap and then go to class for a few hours. I think I'm trying to think, freshman year, I think I took like 12 hours a semester week, 14. So somewhere around then. So you have a couple hours of class a day, which is so much better than high school. I don't know how high schoolers do it. I mean, I guess I did it once too, but being in school for, 7 hours a day, however many hours, it's like college is so much better in terms of you actually have time to breathe between like practice and class, and just like a lot more time in your day in general. So a few hours of classes, we have lunch in the middle of the day, and then afternoon practices are on land. So some mix of like cross training, whether it's erging or biking, running, that type of thing, and then a couple of lifts per week. So we have on the water, on land, and then it goes 6 days a week. Sunday being our off day, and then Saturday is at Texas what we call Super Saturday, and it's just kind of an AM on the water, and then a break, and then an AM2 on land usually.
Gotcha. And one of the things that really stood out was like, you guys put a lot of emphasis, and again, not to, like, again, with the program, but like, you guys did, you had a bunch of erg bikes and stuff like that, right? Like, you put a lot of emphasis into cross training. And one of the cool things that in my conversation with Coach Baker was the fact that you guys can row probably, or you can row in theory if you're in session this whole time, but 12 months a year. Like, there is no, true winter training from a from a weather standpoint, meaning like, hey, you're locked inside a boathouse for 3 months. Like, you can row all year round, especially in the morning sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious for you for you individually, and probably a lot of this stemmed from your time at Texas as well, but the emphasis that you put into training through different modalities, whether that is on the bike or through, weight training, strength training, stuff like that. Obviously the erg is going to be a piece to that regardless of what level you're on as well. But was there a emphasis that you put on personally in diversity within your training modalities and trying to kind of to set you up for, where longevity and just trying to be able to row with confidence and, limit the risks of injuries and stuff like that? Like, was that something that was kind of just for you an emphasis at that you learned at Texas? Like, describe that for me, like a little bit of like the diversity within your training, even now as someone who's going to an Olympics.
Yeah, I definitely think it's very important, especially for someone that's like dealt with injury in the past and then is kind of still like working on making sure my body is always healthy and I'm able to prioritize rowing on the water. I think like training on the bike erg has definitely become so much more popular than it once was. I don't even remember when bike ergs first were like brought into existence, but I know like when I first got to Texas, we had a couple bike ergs and people would just use them occasionally. And then there was one year, maybe it was my freshman year or sophomore year, where like every week we'd go to the erg room and there'd be like a couple more bike ergs and we'd be like, oh no, like everyone hates the bike erg. It's just worse. It hurts. But then slowly, like eventually we had enough for everyone and we would do a lot of like workouts on the bike erg. And when you get used to it, it's fun too in its own way. And we definitely incorporated them a lot, which I think is really great because it's just a different way to work your muscles and to gain strength and fitness. And I think most people at this level have gone through at least like one injury where they have to spend a significant amount of time on the bike erg, and it's definitely a great training tool especially for back injuries when you can't really erg or row, being able to stay fit. And I spent like a couple months, at least I think it's more than a couple months, but on the bike erg, and just felt like I wasn't getting behind in terms of fitness. So I think it's great to incorporate. And I also I like to switch it up even from just the bike erg and the erg. And in my time like off, I'll do a lot of ellipticaling or stairmaster. And I ellipticaled a lot when I was first injured because it was so hard for me to kind of like sit down and be in like a biking position. So elliptical was a great tool that I could use that didn't hurt me. And then just always switching it up to do some sitting, some standing, just a lot of different like positions I think is great. And then here at the training center we definitely use like a lot of different forms of cardio, and it's great because we're all kind of like experienced enough to know our bodies and know like what we need at that time. And sometimes there are weeks where like I feel great and I feel like I can get on the erg for like a significant portion of the cross training sessions, but then some weeks I feel like it's more beneficial for me to bike or run or even elliptical, and it's great to have the freedom to do whichever one you think is going to be best for you at that time.
And on the elliptical, I'm curious with that as a training outlet, like the bike erg, like I think that is like, I always tell athletes, like, if you can get access to a bike erg, like to help just with the wear and tear on the body, but also to bridge the gap if there are those days when, you're feeling a little bit more, physical kind of fatigue and you need something that has a direct crossover to the erg, like the splits in many ways, like they align pretty well. Like it's not perfect, but it's probably, in my opinion, just the most, it checks a lot of boxes in terms of like cross training in a way that's a little bit less taxing than, being on the erg always, or even going on a run with the impact and how rowers are built, right? Like running might not be the number one modality for them for cross training, but on the elliptical and just with anything that you're doing, how are you tracking? Like if you were to use that to kind of bridge the gap, right? You obviously, and we're going to dive into a little bit about just, I'm curious, like in terms of like overcoming your, the injury that you experienced, right? Obviously the bigger one. But with bridging that gap from when you were hurt to when you're full throttle, ready to row and compete, like how did you monitor like your fitness to be able to bridge that gap? Like if you were on the butt, or whether you're on the biker, you can obviously have the splits and stuff like that. But if you're on the elliptical or doing other modalities, like, was it heart rate training? Was it like, were you just kind of going off of perceived effort? Like, were you scripting it kind of very similar to, hey, I'm just trying to accumulate volume on an elliptical? Like, what do I like? Shed a little light on that for athletes who maybe have experienced, or are currently experiencing something that is keeping them from being on the water or on the erg.
Yeah, so now that I'm on the national team, we use heart rate zones for everything, which makes it super like a lot easier to track, because you just go hard enough to be in your heart rate zone, and you're kind of like given which zone each workout should be in, so you know exactly how like hard you're supposed to go, and then it kind of adjusts itself for if you're super fatigued that day, your heart rate might be higher, but then you're gonna just go a little less hard to get in the zone, so it makes it a little bit more uniform. But in college, it was really just based on an allocated number of minutes, like this is the workout, and then you kind of just go off of your RPE. And I think I had spent enough time on the elliptical to kind of know like what metrics were going to make me feel like a certain way after a certain number of minutes. But I think, really just going off of like how I felt and trusting that I knew how to like push myself hard enough, but then not too hard to get this same benefit out of it that I would get on a machine that has metrics on it.
Yeah. And again, like, I think that's like for athletes out there, it's like, hey, like there are, obviously the water and the erg are the preferred methods to train because they're rowing specific for building our overall fitness within rowing. But having different modalities, I think is obviously really important. I took note of that when I was, at Texas, like, oh, like they put a lot of emphasis on the bike erg, with all of them in the training facility, which I thought was really neat to see, especially when you can consider that you can be on the water 12 months a year. Like, you kind of have the luxury of being able to do both, right? And continuing to work on your craft, but also have that fitness outlet that, can limit some of the wear and tear. So, with that, you've referenced the, and I'm curious in terms of one of the questions I always like to ask athletes like yourself, who are at, again, the top of our sport, about to obviously, race at the Olympic level, obviously at the college level, right? Performing at the highest of the highs. But I'm curious for athletes, and this is one of my favorite things to just learn from athletes who are really doing incredible things within our sport, but dealing with setbacks or, injuries and things like that, like, and actually within two contexts, and like, you can take it a couple different directions, but obviously there's the big end, the injury that you had to get surgery on and had to overcome in order to get ready for what I think was, right, you said it was fall of your senior year or fall of your graduate year?
Fall of my graduate year when I had surgery.
So fall of your graduate year, right? And then obviously you had a quick turnaround. You're able to get healthy enough to compete, right? Obviously I was that was last year. So I was able to kind of see you compete at during the regular season and obviously at the national championship. So you obviously there's a lot that goes into having to have a quick turnaround to be able to compete or to be able to row in general, and then hopefully be able to compete. And I'm curious for you, just within two areas. One is, do athletes like yourself ever experience bad training days? I'm curious in that regard. That's one area that I want to talk about, meaning like what goes through your mind if you're on the erg, right? We use the erg, or on the water, right? Like, what goes through your mind in terms of like, okay, this workout or this piece just isn't going my way. I'm either in the moment and I'm going, I'm trying to kind of hang on and do the best I can, or it's the end of the workout and I just haven't, it just wasn't my day. And maybe this is one of a couple of days that we're stringing together that weren't optimal performances for yourself, right? To your own standard. I'm curious in terms of that. And then I want to bridge that into dealing with a longer term setback or pause in training. But let's start with more of the in the moment, the micro, and then we'll kind of bridge it off into more of the dealing with a significant injury that sidelines you for considerable time. Let's start with let's start there.
Yeah, I think Like everyone's gonna have their bad days, regardless of what level you're at. And the most important thing is just keeping perspective, which can be hard when you're first starting or when you don't have as much experience. Because I think the longer like training periods you can string together, and just the longer you've been rowing in general, you just know that there are always going to be ups and downs, like regardless of how hard you're working, or things just aren't always going to be perfect. So just like knowing that really just comes with time, but trusting that it's going to get better, and just looking at like overall trends rather than each day, because each day is obviously going to fluctuate and have ups and downs. But then, if you think about like my bad days now are going to be better than my best days from, a few months ago or like a year ago. So just kind of looking at trends over time rather than, days, weeks, or even like a month or however long you feel like you're not like doing your best.
Yeah. And then, so again, like, I think that's great perspective for athletes, because like to hear, like, again, like, can you see the whole picture? Can you see the whole picture in your training, right? It's not, your entire life doesn't come down to that one particular session, that one particular stroke, right? That you like, it's more, can you take a step back? Can you see the entire layout of things and actually be able to kind of put things in perspective and see the trends, right? Am I getting better over time, rather than being stuck in the weeds of performances that don't feel optimal? And talking about more when it strings together for longer durations. And I think this is a great time where, with like just talking about coming back from injury, long-term injury. I'm sure there was a significant portion of your graduate year where you weren't able to be in the boat. And whenever that, kind of, you're able to kind of get back to full strength, or whatever strength you needed to be to get back into the boat. What are some things that maybe you experienced that athletes could kind of take away from that experience? Like, what are some things that you leveraged or leaned on to be able to bridge that gap, keep the fire lit to eventually get back into the boat and finish off the season?
Yeah, I think like for me, I had at least, I think it was like 7 or 8 months where I couldn't row out of the year. And then for maybe 5 of them, or 4 or 5, I couldn't do anything at all. So, I mean, I could like walk uphill on a treadmill. I think that was the extent of my like exercise that I could do. And one of the hardest parts was trying to like still be mentally with the team while not being able to do like what I wanted to do. And I really had to mentally take a step back, and that like was what was best for me, just because I knew that if I was like at practice every day watching everyone like rowing or just like being part of the team, as much as like I wanted to be there so badly, and I think it would have been great if I could have done that mentally, but it was just too hard to kind of watch all that happening, knowing that I may never like be able to row again, or I didn't know at the time if I was getting surgery or not, and just kind of didn't really know how it was all going to work out. And I think in retrospect, if I had known, okay, I'll eventually be able to row again, I'm going to be able to race the NCAAs and race every race of the season, it's going to be okay, then maybe I would have. But I think just like knowing that it's okay to take a step back, and knowing that sometimes you're doing what's best for the team by doing what's best for yourself. And I was really lucky to have like great support from all my teammates that really understood that, and they just wanted me to be like okay as a person rather than just okay so that I could grow again. So I definitely appreciated that. But I think in terms of like working out again, just kind of visualizing, I did a lot of visualization of like what it would be like to practice again and to race again, and just trying to like think of corrections that I was making in the boat and like imagine them in my head, like as I was on the bike. And even like watching races I loved to do, because biking for hours and hours a day gets so boring. So like watching old NCAA races or like world rowing videos to kind of remember why I was going through like everything that was happening and what I was trying to get back to, kind of helped me stay focused.
Yeah, I think, and that's a longer period of time than I would like. You said 6 or 7 months, and a significant portion of that you weren't able to even, do any working out. And
Mhm.
when was the start of the injury, and then when were you able to kind of get back into full strength? Like, well, like what time of the year was this?
So it first happened ar- the very beginning or the very end of 2022, very beginning of 2023. So um, I took a little bit of time off immediately afterwards, but it wasn't getting any better from taking time off. So I knew that regardless, like rowing wasn't making it any worse. It was just kind of going to be as bad as it was, like regardless of what I was doing. So I figured if I was going to be injured, I would much rather be like rowing than not rowing. So like I made the decision myself to like continue, and I was doing like everything I could at the time to manage it. I had a great PT at school that was helping me with everything, and the coaches were super great about like if I need to monitor or modify things, I could do that. So everything was like I was definitely making the most of what I could do, and finished off the season and then raced the summer at U23s. And then immediately following that, my plan was just to take a few months completely doing nothing. And the hope was that it would heal itself just by like not exercising at all. But it didn't really like make any difference. I think it maybe got a little bit better, but it was just kind of like the only way to fix it was going to be to get surgery. So once I realized that it wasn't getting any better by taking time off, is when I like made the decision to get surgery. And then after that, I had to take a few months of doing nothing, and then I could bike after that. So I started like biking, doing the elliptical and physical therapy, and then started rowing again in February of the next year.
Wow. So that's amazing. Like, because you, again, like I said, I was down at the Michigan race, which was in April. Like you had just really just got, you're only a few weeks into just getting back, into the swing of things. Like and I think in general, like a lot of athletes can learn a lot from just that story, where it's like, even if you have this long term setback, meaning like for a significant period of time that leaves you on the sideline, like it's not the end of the world. Like you can get through it. You can get to the other side of it. But what do you do in that period of time to help bridge the gap and help keep the energy high and keep that fire lit? And but again, like it doesn't mean it's over if you have to take a little bit of a pause. It's just, hey,
Yeah.
how do you manage those steps? And I think that's a great example of it. Like, because really, if we're talking about it, like you're talking about 14, 15 months ago, you were just starting to get back in the row. Like this was last year, right? Like, spring of last year. So that's an incredible story to kind of see where you are now. And I'm curious for you, as we kind of, I don't want to take too much of your time. We'll kind of have a few more questions for you if that works for you. But what's a superpower that you feel like you have as a rower, as an athlete? Like you reference, and what I mean by that is, like, what do you feel like is something that you individually are in the top 1% of for rowers? Meaning, like, I love to take naps. You referenced that earlier. So I feel like that's something that I put a lot of emphasis on. Or not even a superpower, but what's like a thing that you emphasize in your training that you feel really has contributed to where you are today? Again, I make the joke about taking naps, but obviously that's recovery, that's sleep, right? Like maybe it is you're very conscious of, you know, different mobility exercises so you can stay loose and stay prepared. Maybe it is more, from a rowing technique standpoint, from a fitness standpoint, like it can go in any direction. But I'm curious, like, what do you feel like for you has been one of those performance kind of areas that you feel like has really helped position you for where you are today?
Yeah, I think it's definitely changed throughout time, but after being injured, definitely focusing on like doing my physical therapy exercises and like really just committing to that has been like a really big thing for me. Just not only to stay healthy and be able to do the training because I'm like building up strengths that before were weaknesses and kind of led to me getting injured in the first place, but also because the same like deficiencies that I had that probably led to getting injured, um, working on those have also helped my technique a lot just because like those areas in the stroke that I struggled with maybe weren't because I didn't like want to make changes or didn't understand like what technical changes I need to make, but because my body just wasn't allowing me to do it and to have it be repeatable over the course of a practice or like a whole week or month or however long. So really like doing my physical therapy exercises and making sure to stay on top of rehab and things like that.
I think again, like that's another really valuable piece for just anyone out there. Like regardless of whether you had a significant injury or not, but just the little things, the little things that again, like rowing, it's a repetitive, grind of a sport where you're doing the same motion over and over and over again at different intensities. And so many athletes kind of get stuck in, this is the only thing I need, this is the only thing I'm going to focus on and do, and how that affects them in the long run. Right. But in many ways, right, like I don't want to say it takes something significant to kind of get you in that frame of mind of doing the little things, but obviously that seems like it was something that maybe you started to maybe put a little bit more emphasis into it after experiencing what you did. I think that's a huge thing for athletes, regardless of whether they had an experience like that or not. It's like staying on top of those little things that can help keep you upright and able to perform the sport at whatever level that you are on.
Yeah.
So I love that. That's super, very valuable. Wasn't the sleep, wasn't the naps, wasn't
that definitely helps, but I think I would do that regardless, so not something extra.
Yeah. Gotcha. No, that's I'm sure you're not alone with that for athletes who are competing at, putting in the work that you're doing. And then another question, I kind of two more questions for you. My other question would be regarding just again, if we brought it back to your decision to go to Texas, be a part of that organization, do all the great things that you were able to do there, what advice would you give to the high school athlete who is in, their sophomore, junior, maybe even senior year, whatever it may be, but they're thinking about, or they're just getting started with the process of, hey, I'm thinking about schools that I want to attend. Maybe a school like Texas might, be intimidating, or maybe I'm curious whether I do want to row at the Division I level. I don't know if this is something that I'm really up for, right? Or just in general, what advice would you give to a high school athlete who is currently going through the process of figuring out what is the best situation, what is the best fit for them, in the college rowing decision-making process? What advice would you give to those athletes?
I would say the like biggest piece of advice that I have is pick a school where you can envision yourself spending like 40 hours a week with the team, because you're going to spend so much time with your team at practice, eating meals together. I lived with like my teammates most of or all 5 years of school, so you want to make sure that they're not only people that you think you can row well with, but that you will just genuinely enjoy spending time with, because no matter where you go, you're going to have ups and downs, and there's going to be setbacks, and there's going to be like great times and then not so great times, and your teammates are the people that you're going to rely on like through the good and the bad. And I think like it's great to win, and everyone wants to like go to a school where they think they're going to succeed at, but winning really means nothing if you don't like really enjoy the company of the people that you're doing it with. And just like those things, it's not going to last forever. Like the joy of doing well or winning a national championship, yeah, it's great in the moment, and it'll be like something that you'll have forever, but at the same time, what you're going to take away isn't one race result or a number of race results. It's like the experiences that you've had with the people that you're doing it with. So really just look for a school where you feel like you will fit in with the team, and those are the type of people that are going to make you a better person.
That's great advice too. And I think like even for athletes, like just finding that ability to, or finding a team, like again, like I can hear it just like in our conversation over the last hour or so, like just the value of finding the right program for you, like, and you demonstrate that just through how you talk about Texas. Like you're an example of that just through how you talk about, you know, that program and the experiences and the teammates that you're able to share those experiences with. I think that's a huge, again, like I think that's incredibly valuable for any athlete out there. It's like, can you try to, it may not be at a school like Texas that might feel overwhelming to certain athletes, right? They're like, hey, I don't really want to row for a, you know, team that goes to the grand final NCAAs, but it's like, can you take some of the stuff that you're sharing to us and be like, okay, can I apply that to, maybe I'm looking at a program at this, at this level or this level, or like you can take, there's things within that you can take no matter what experience you're pursuing at, within rowing. So I think that's incredibly valuable. And I think my last question for you is, you just finished your college career. You're about to go to Paris here in a couple months, compete at the Olympic level. And some of this might be predicated on what happens 2 or 3 months from now at the Olympics. But what for you, again, like you've had this amazing path of, and in many ways a roller coaster as well, but you've had this journey within rowing and you literally just kind of got started with this next venture, right? Kind of moving into the Olympic level. What can you see as like, is it like, hey, I know right from the jump, I go to the Olympics, we do everything that we want to do. I'm going to keep this as a career for me? Or is there something like, what do you feel like is next for you? And maybe that could be as simple as, hey, you know what? I'm going to get through Paris and I'm going to take 5 months off because I've been working so hard and I feel like I might need time to regroup. But it could be as short term as that or as long term as whatever you have thought about. But give the audience a little context on what's next after Paris.
Yeah, I think it's going to be kind of like a decision as I go in terms of like what exactly the route looks like. And it's hard to like plan. I guess 4 years is kind of a long time, it feels like, and you never know like what's going to happen in those 4 years. So you can only really plan like, I guess, a year at a time in terms of rowing. But I don't feel like I'm like done with rowing, and I don't feel like I feel like I can just continue to like get things out of it that will prepare me for my life in general. And just, I'm having so much fun like training with this group of people and being at the training center. And I just feel like I'm learning so much, not only about rowing, but just like about myself and life in general. And just like being around all these great women that are such role models. I definitely want to continue after this. And it's going to be kind of a get home from Paris and just go to Austin and figure it out. I don't have a very good or solid plan in place, which is probably not ideal, but I will be figuring that out as I go.
Yeah, no, that's and again, like it's a remarkable kind of just path that you've been on. It's really exciting, and I think to kind of wrap things up, like your journey to kind of like, and again, I love all the stuff regarding the Olympics and what's next, but really like what really gets me excited is hearing people talk about, their experiences at the college level and the value that being a college athlete had on their life, the impact that it had on their life. Like I think to hear how you articulated that message, right? You could communicate, or we could hear it through just your, how you were talking, like it had a amazing impact on your life. And I think that or a lot of athletes out there can relate to that. But
yeah,
anything that we can do to support, you or help you, or is maybe it's as simple as, hey, tune in on, and watch us do our thing in a couple months. But anything that we can do to help you, or anything any final thoughts that you have for us before we wrap things up here?
I guess you can just give, we have Instagram for our training center, Women in the Boat. So if you want to follow along with like our journey through World Cup in Paris, you can follow us on Instagram, and yeah, feel free to message me if you have any questions about anything.
Amazing. I love it. Well, Kate, again, I really appreciate it. This was awesome. This was a great conversation. I love diving into some really fun topics, and thank you so much for coming on. Good luck with what you have coming up over the next few weeks and months. You have a very busy schedule ahead of you, and I'm looking forward to seeing the journey and maybe talking about it down the line, once things are all wrapped up. Again, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.